I would like to give the floor to our speakers. Our first speaker is May-Britt Öhman. She's an associate professor in environmental history, researcher at the Center for Multidisciplinary Studies on Racism at Uppsala University, as well as guest senior lecturer and researcher at Luleå University of Technology. May-Britt is the founder of Feminist Technoscience Research Group, which focus on indigenous perspectives and methodologies, and co-founder of UPSAM, the Association for Research related to Sami, who are one of the indigenous people in the region of Sami, which includes northern parts of Sweden. May-Britt also leads DALPKE, Indigenous Climate Change Studies Group, and Pandemic in the Arctic North Project. Thank you, May-Britt, for joining us, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So I'll start and see if I can share my screen here. Yeah, can you see my full screen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so I put a title to this. I will speak, I can mention just that I am both an academic and I'm Lulean for Sami and also have Tornedalian heritage. I am at Uppsala University, as mentioned by Darja, and at Luleå University of Technology, Unit of History. And I am the president of the Sami Ednama Fria Universiteta, the Samiland Free University. And I will mention this in the end, what this is, because on the whole Sami territory, there's so far only one Sami university on the Norwegian side of Sami territories, the Sami Alaskola, and the Samiland Free University is my vision, together with others, of establishment of completely Sami-led and free university. But I will mention that in the end if there's time. But I use this being the president as a way for me to speak as if there was a completely free Sami university, led by Sami and from Sami perspectives. So it doesn't really exist as a physical structure, just to clarify. So this is the Sami territories. The Sami have lived in this region since at least the last ice age, 10,000 years by now. And the nation states were established from about the 16th century, depending how you count, 13th to 16th century. So between 500 to 700 years ago. And we can see that Sami view of relationships to lands, water, non-humans differ completely from the Western modern exploitation view. And this can be seen in how Sami both speak on daily basis and relate, and also is established in policies, for instance, as the Sami Parliament on the Swedish side in the environmental program that you can go into and read online. There's an English translation there, a part of it. And for the modern Western exploitation view, I would say you see continuously different decisions and policies that shows that there's no long-term taking into account relationships to lands and waters and more than humans and even humans. And as you may all know about, Greta Thunberg wrote this on Twitter when the Swedish government confirmed that they would go ahead with a mine in the Luleå River in Sami territories in March this year, despite its being challenged by all the local Sami, reindeer herding, and also the Sami Parliament, as well as the Swedish County Administrative Board. So this is from the protect actions in 2013 at Kallak site. in the Lule River. And this is manifestation of protector work in 2012. A lot of focus is on protecting the reindeer herding areas and waters, but also the whole downstream, because this is of the Lule River that is drinking water for Boden and Luleå downstream, as you can see on this map. It is part also of a hydropower exploited river, and you can see the yellow arrow is where the planned mine is. So it's in our hydropower regulated system. I have been writing a lot on this and speaking together with a colleague on the danger of introducing also a mine in an already hydropower regulated system. If you want to read more, you can find our articles. In view of the historic decision from the Social Democratic governmental party in Sweden to want to enter NATO, I want to add that this area is highly militarized. There's a military training test area over Sami territories, and we currently see like all kinds of training from other countries, and there's both noise and pollution and very bad follow-up on the impacts on water. We've been trying to do a bit of studies on that, but there's no much resources to study what this means. No follow-up on the impacts. So what has racial biology, settler colonialism to do with climate change or environmental destruction? Well, I would like to put it the way, what if Sami had a majority in the Swedish or Norwegian, Finnish, and Russian parliament? As you know, Russia has also Sami territories that extends into Russia, and the war in Ukraine has also implications for the collaborations over the borders. But we have always troubles with the borders here, as our territories stretch over these nations. But you can always think about what the politics in regard to nature and climate would look like with Sami influence, and how the actual exclusion of Sami is related to racist categorizations of Sami as inferiors to Swedes, which has been ongoing since the 19th century. Sami, on the other hand, have never been silent, always worked to protect nature and good relations. Until 19th century, Sami were more involved in decision-making in courts. However, in the end of the 19th century, there was an increasing destruction and land theft, parallel to Sami being excluded and also depicted as inferior as children. And as a result, Sami would have to become activists, so-called activists. As Sami have started to demand our rights since early 20th century, challenging this settler colonial destructive enterprises. And the work you can see today is a continuation of this work. I think just briefly mention terminologies here: protest or protect. I prefer to use protect, as this is a way of protecting. Protest is, I would say, anyone can protest whether it's good or bad, but protection of lands and waters, that's what Sami are actually doing. And you can compare this, how the work of indigenous people always, often are referred to as civil disobedience, obstructing justice, or obstructing developing, being in the way. So I refer to it as work, protection work. And academia, where is the academia in all of this? I like this picture, it says a lot. White privilege is your history being part of the core curriculum and mine being taught as an elective. This is very much the case in terms of Sami history. So you can always think of at your own university where you've been studying as a student, or where you are currently working or teaching, what is actually taught about Sami and indigenous history, culture, tradition. What did you yourself learn in school, at university? And if you're in Europe, this is the only recognized indigenous people of Europe, the Sami. So normally it should be part of the teaching. And if you study any global history, you should also have read about indigenous peoples around the world, because there are indigenous peoples in all corners of the world. Think of what you did study yourself. Think of how many Sami or indigenous person you know who are professors, lecturers, and researchers within academia. And what you know of Sami political mobilization to protect lands, waters, humans, non-humans. Just to take you on a very short tour, we have two major persons who've been in the front line, Karin Stenberg and Elsa Laula Renberg. But there are many others, and women of the Sami have been visible and are historically documented since the 14th century. But this is a book by Elsa Laula, Facing Life or Death versus Truth Regarding the Situation of the Sami in 1904. The first Sami Congress was held in over the colonial state borders, was held in 1917, February 6 to 8, with 150 Sami delegates discussing issues of importance. It was organized by the Brorska Skanken Sami Women's Association that was established in 1910. We have Karin Stenberg, who wrote the book together with the support of Valdemar Lindholm and Sami in Arvidsjaur. It is our wish, a request to the Swedish nation from the Sami people. On the Norwegian side, there was a major struggle over a decade to protect the Alta River against Norwegian's colonial state, destructive hydropower exploitation. While they failed to stop to protect the river, there were other outcomes, as a strong Sami movement, the Sami University College in Kautokeino, and Sami parliaments in Norway and Sweden, and that's also where the flag comes from, that you can see behind me here. Yeah, I work with superdisciplinary research, feminist, indigenous research methodologies. I will not go through this too much, but this is where you can see a lot how I work. I refer to the method as superdisciplinary research. I would refer to it as listening and learning, listening to and learning from those who know more than I do, whether it's human or non-human knowledge, and to bring in those voices into academic platforms, and also having a constant exchange. The universities tend to be very closed from the outside, and it's a constant work to keep being in touch with the outside of academia. So this is something I work a lot with. I do publications with Sami, bringing Sami who are not in academia to academic conferences, and also scholars to Sami everyday life. And we have film collaborations. The indigenous perspective on climate change. I would say that people today are worried for a way of life, survival, culture, and comfort. But then for indigenous people, you have to see that the apocalypse has been here for about 500 years, with the venue of the settler colonial destructive relationships. So 500 years of indigenous people's experience. Today, fossil fuels are a problem, global warming is a problem, but this is also used to reinforce genocide and deportation of indigenous peoples, as well as eradication of indigenous cultures and livelihood. So this is the question now, maybe now it's time to include indigenous people's experience and knowledges in decision making. And Kyle White is a colleague that is part of the Indigenous Climate Change Studies work. We made a film on 1 month of 16-year-old Hampus Andersson, who lived of lands and waters in Norrbotten, Sweden. This is available online. A lot of the issues right now on the so-called green transition is the wind power, which is now expanding massively. And this has become a major threat to Sami reindeer grazing lands. We have to remember climate change is not only about carbon dioxide emissions. All the other aspects of of climate is the protection of forests, watercourses, soil, and to be able to move to other areas for livelihood if one area is no longer available, and to have secure water resources. We have 51 reindeer herding areas on the Swedish side of Sápmi. These are economic organizations and geographical areas for reindeer herding. They gather several reindeer herders and their business. These are decided by the Swedish state. It is not the Sami traditional way, but the Swedish state that has organized it this way, which brought along a lot of complications. But this is a situation in any case. And I, in particular, collaborate with Gällivare Forest Sami Henrik Andersson. We work a lot with film, and it was Hampus Andersson is his son. So we have a film that is about wind power, winds of destruction on a place that is now under threat to be exploited for wind power. And you can see this. Do I have the time just to show? I'll show 3 minutes of a film to you.
Please, yes.
Och så här trä som är gårdsröttersmatt. Gammalt. Så det här gamla trädet får inte se så.
På undersidan sådana här ska den finnas.
Vad för någonting?
Den där brandgula tickan som det finns bara på 5 ställen i Sverige. Hittad. Där är ett av ställena. Om det blir snurra runt ett sånt här område, då blir det här helt värdelöst för renskötseln också. Lokalt så är det ju kommunpolitikerna som tror att det är en massa arbetstillfällen. Och pengar till kommunen. Här har provmasten stått nu att de har testat vindstyrkorna. Och renarna har varit skytt det här området. Det finns 2 sådana här lägen och på de ställena är provmasterna, så det är absolut topp där de får fram. Och det är klart, ska jag visa siffror mot investerare så tar jag ju gärna och visar dem som är bäst. Men av 150 snurror så finns det bara 2 sådana här lägen. Våran sameby går ju på knäna. Det är ju skittufft ekonomiskt för att vi har så mycket exploatörer som vill in. Och vi ska försvara oss mot att skriva svar och vara på möten det med dem. Men vi har inte en krona för att göra det. Här ser man ju ytan med en provmast tar mark i anspråk. Om det här hade varit en riktig granskog så är det ju mycket hänglavsbärande träd som måste avverkas bara för provmasten, bara för det här svamlet. Hur ska man tyda en sån här skylt när jag håller på med det yrke jag håller på med? Jag är renskötare. Jag har min renskötselrätt här. Hur kan någon sätta upp en skylt att jag måste vara behörig för att beträda detta område?
So we have a few more other films also, and a longer version of this one. This was filmed in 2015, and this was during the process of working against this wind power establishment. And just this year, The company Vasavind, that is owned by the Dutch pension fund APG, was granted the right to construct 57 up to 200 meters tall windmills in this area. So this is massively promoted and financially supported by the Swedish state, European Union, environmental organization, and referred to as green transition in the name of climate change mitigation. So thereby pushing Sami to pursue a struggle to protect lands and water and the reindeer herding grounds. So in the Gällivare Forest, Sami village and the Flackeberg group are now at risk to have give up their traditional culture in spite of declarations of rights of indigenous people like UNRIP and many other declarations and conventions. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how the Dutch pension fund APG states that they have good future insights that looks at not only financial returns, but doing our bit for society and solidarity, sustainability.
Thank you.
Another film is On Green Wind Power, Sami Indigenous Scientific Perspectives on Fossil Dependent and Environmental Destructive Designs. You can watch yourself. So all in all, this science knowledge production is never a gaze from nowhere. It is never objective. There are bodies, human bodies behind the production and financing of knowledge and science. And we have to take into account the consequences of racial biology, racism, settler colonialism, and erasure of Sami culture.
Thank you, May-Britt, for your content.
I'll just finalize in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm also wanting to look at the academic geography of Sweden, where universities are placed. In the furthest north, which is the main area for natural resources, there are only 2 universities. The most universities are in the south, and none of these is actually working with representation of Sami in education research or making it possible for Sami to be open with their identities. So the Sami Land Free University is my initiative to start thinking that way. And it's also available online. So you're welcome to the Dalke YouTube channel and also my different channels where you can read more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, May-Britt, so much for drawing our attention to this very important long-term conflict, which is pretty much related to the interconnections between environment and sustainability.
Daria, sorry for the interruption again. Your voice or sound is a bit low. If you make it a bit stronger, oh, it's okay.
Thank
Now
you.
it's fine.
Thank you. I would like to thank May-Britt once more for her contributions, and I would like to give floor to our second speaker, Edwick Madzimure from Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Edwick is a development practitioner with a background in rural livelihoods and gender. She is the founding director of Women's International for Peace and Freedom Zimbabwe section. Until the date, Edwick has done a number of community projects from capacity building workshops, climate change mitigation campaigns, campaigns for disarmament, anti-gender-based violence campaigns to human rights awareness programs. Edwick is also currently studying a PhD in development studies with a focus on rural women's livelihoods, water scarcity, and rural development. Today, Edwick will talk about the gendered aspects of climate change, militarism, and on rural women's livelihoods. Edwick, thank you for joining us, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Drea. I'm not going to be sharing my screen because my network is not very stable. So allow me to share my screen. I hope I'm going to be successful. Just a minute, I'm looking for the document that I want to share.
Sure.
Okay. How do I move this? Yeah. Yeah, I think I got it. Okay, so basically my presentation is going to be focused on the gendered impacts of climate change, particularly focusing on the livelihoods of rural women. We conducted a research, and in this research, we were looking at climate change vulnerabilities, primarily focusing on rural women. So our research findings, we realized that when you look at most African countries, especially in the rural setup, they rely mostly on rain-fed agriculture. Now, the effects of climate change have led to devastating impacts that are exposing women to a multitude of challenges, such as water scarcity, food insecurity, financial constraints that are contributing to gender-based violence, early child marriages, early teen pregnancies. You realize that as a result of climate change,
Edwick, just to, sorry for interruption. Can you click on the presentation? We can see the presentation.
On the presentation, which one?
We cannot see the presentation if you are showing us.
I'm sorry. This one. Can you see it?
The screen is frozen.
Nothing.
Now we can see it. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I was seeing it on my laptop, so I thought you could see it too. I'm sorry for that. Okay, fine. Now, going back to where I was trying to explain that most rural livelihoods in our African context are based on agriculture. So as a result of climate change, we are experiencing shifting weather patterns, especially when you focus on rainfall patterns. In most rural areas, they are being affected by perennial droughts. If not perennial droughts, they are being affected by floods. So which is a challenge now for rain-fed agriculture, because they cannot afford to have irrigation mechanisms. So as a result of the failure of agriculture, which is their main source of livelihood, this is contributing to financial constraints, because agriculture is their main source of income. So it's contributing to financial constraints. As a result of financial constraints, we realize that most young girls are dropping out of school and they are being impregnated early. Some of them are getting married as early as 13 years or 14 years, they're getting married. And these financial constraints are also contributing to gender-based violence, especially for women. So we did this research in an area where small-scale mining has been used as a way or as an adaptive livelihood. But then when we're doing this research, we wanted to really see how local women are benefiting from this alternative livelihood. But however, we also discovered that at local level, there are other forms of militarism that are emanating from the small-scale mining activities. You may ask me why. because this is being contributed by the shortage of resources. So since mining is the only alternative source of livelihood, you realize that most of the community members are now fighting to have access into the mining sites. So while they are fighting to have access into the mining sites, they are using traditional weapons, spears, catapults, and which makes it very, very unsafe for women to participate meaningfully in the small-scale mining activities. And the other challenge that we also realized was that gender is also now being used as a way of excluding women from taking part from the actual extraction of gold. Because of our biological makeup of being women, most women, we go for our menstrual cycles, and most men take that as a reason why women are not supposed to be near the mining shafts, which is a challenge now for women who are trying to earn a living, because they are not allowed to get near the shafts. But what they can only do, they can provide food for the miners, they can sell food, they can sell wares to the miners on these mining sites. But then the challenge that women are now facing is that she can leave her home, go to the mining sites to cook. As you can see from the picture there, we've got women that are cooking food for sale, to sell to the men on the mining sites. The challenge now comes at payment time. Most of these men, they can eat the food and then they refuse to pay the food after eating the food. And women cannot go anywhere to report those men because they know that they are militarized. They've got, they carry weapons. They've got traditional weapons on them and they carry these weapons. And if you try to challenge them, you'll be attacked. So that's a challenge for women. And it is also a challenge for the police, because the police can also not reprimand them because they are also afraid of these small-scale miners. So that's a challenge. So I tried to put a table there in which I put the effects of climate change, particularly focusing on our African terrain. You realize we've got problems of water scarcity due to perennial droughts, food insecurity, like I mentioned earlier on, financial constraints, and widening inequality gaps. Poverty and floods are also contributing to environmental degradation. And then now you look at militarism at global level. Militarism at global level is also widening the inequality gaps. The political instability is rising. I'm sure you know what is happening today in Ukraine. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is also affecting all the other countries. We've got this is also fueling conflicts at global level and even at regional level, because we've got some countries that are in support of Russia, we've got some countries that are in support of Ukraine, which is a challenge. And it's also contributing to arms race. While we are looking at arms race is also contributing in a way to gas emissions. So it's like a cycle that has been created, a cycle in which we've got climate change, we've got conflict, we've got militarism, which is a challenge for us at local level, and it's also a challenge at global level. So at local level, like I was talking about earlier on, how artisanal mining is being used as an adaptation mechanism. Militarism is in the sector at local level. These miners are carrying weapons. They are using weapons to defend their livelihoods. They are using weapons to ensure that they've got access to the mining sites, which is a challenge, because we now have conflicts due to the mining being used as an adaptation mechanism, number one. And the other thing, we also have conflict due to environmental degradation, because these miners are also contributing to environmental degradation. They leave gullies, of which when you look at rural population, they also rely on livestock production. So I'm sure you are aware of what will happen if their cattle go to graze into the areas where there are gullies, there are open gullies everywhere. And they also use dangerous chemicals such as cyanide. And if their livestock indulge these chemicals, they die, which is a challenge as well. And then you also focus on the discrimination and the exclusion of women and young girls in the actual extraction of gold, of which this is also, we are looking at it as an alternative measure of livelihood, but women are being excluded. And then we also have young boys in these small scale mining communities that are being raised, to be violent. So as they grow up, already we've got militarized masculinities. And the other challenge that we have, that I've discussed earlier on when I was discussing about how women can go to the mining sites to cook for the miners so that they'll buy food, but the miners will just eat the food and not pay them. That's contributing to financial exploitation, which is also a challenge. Now, coming back to global militarism and focusing also on us as developing countries, you realize that a lot of money is being used on militarism. And when you compare with the money that is being used to achieve the sustainable development goals, I'm sure you are all aware that most of the money is going towards militarism, which is a challenge because we need more money or more investment to be put towards sustainable development goals. Because the reason why we are having conflicts, especially in developing countries, is because of lack of food. It's because of poverty. So if we achieve these sustainable development goals, I feel it will be a great stride towards solving the challenge that we are having on militarism. And then you also notice that militarism is contributing a lot to terrorism in Africa. You look at examples of countries like Mozambique, Mali. We've got countries that are always in conflict. They are always in conflict because they have arms that are being shipped to Africa, which is a challenge. And then that will take you back to the point that I was discussing earlier, that if we could have more resources being channeled towards humanitarian aid instead of militarism, that will be, to me, that would be best. And then there is also need for long-term conflict resolutions, such as disarmament, demilitarization, and investments in economic and social rights and environmental protection. So that was it on my presentation. I am also available for any questions that may be arising from my presentation. And I apologize if I was too fast because I wanted to beat the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edwick. Thank you for this contribution. Yes, this is really the aspects you drew attention was quite important in terms of, as you say, long-term solutions, which we don't much talk about, such as disarmament, demilitarization, investments in peaceful initiatives. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to our third speaker, then we can continue with questions and discussion. So Anna Kryvenko is our third speaker.
Hi, hello.
Hello,
one
yes.
moment, I will try to find also my presentation.
Let me introduce you. Anna Kryvenko is an independent filmmaker and fine art photography artist, born in Ukraine and living in Czech Republic. She's a graduate of the Center for Audiovisual Studies at Film and TV School of the of Performing Arts in Prague, with films and performances screened at various festivals across Europe. Anna has quite a number of award-winning films, including Silently Like a Comet, Listen to the Horizon, and My Unknown Soldier. Her newest short film, Class of Collective Loneliness, was a finalist of a Vision competition in Czech Republic. Anna has long been interested in the portrayal of war and its consequences in cyberspace and film. And at the moment, she is interested in the relationship and effects of war on animals and the environment. And today she will join us with her speech around these topics. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daria. Can you see my presentation?
I think it's seen by all.
Okay, so I want to say that from the very beginning, all of my works are in one way to another related to several subjects or themes, we can say. It's Ukraine as a home space, cities and architecture, and wars and revolution in cyberspace and media space. And all of this subjects are united by one leitmotif and point of view of the world. For me, it's memory, both historical and personal. Today I will speak about only few of my works. I think it will be good if I will speak not so much, but show you some examples of my work. I think it will be more to work better. Because of the memories connected to all of this topic, at some moment I start working with archives or archive material. For me personally, I work with 4 types of archives. It's official archives, so archives that you can find, for example, at cinematheques or national archives institutions. So this is like part of the film from the Chronica or from some old films, and you can use this material that you know name of the author or a cameraman or a producer. Second part is internet and social media archives, and for me it's not only archives, internet archives that you can use legally without any problem, but also some materials that people shot, and we can find it in social media or YouTube or Instagram, and it can use it. For me, it's important that today I don't want to talk about legally the legally stuff with archives, because it's really complicated, but only about the visuality of this material. Third part is the personal archives. So this is archives that, for example, from my own family or the family of my friends. So this is archives that we can identify the author or the main protagonist in this archives. And the fourth part is found footage archives. This is like archive that when you don't know who is the author of this material. And this is, for example, great examples that everybody hears, the stories that you can go to flea market and find like box of for €5, find a great box of 8mm films and do something with this material. And I actually use all these 4 types of archives in my practice. So one of the subjects that is really important for me, all the subject is interconnected, of course. This is not like that you can say that you can actually connect. Oh no, you can actually connect it with each other with no problem. And for first part, it's a personal history and family archives. This is actually picture from my old video installation, and I use in this film. I shot a new, for me, place in Prague, and use my old, like my new home when I was a student, and use my old family pictures, family slides as a filter behind the camera. So you can have this like multiply perspective in a picture. But in the along the events in the on the Maidan and after it war in Eastern Ukraine in 2013-2014, I began to take an interest in archives that is not mine, both official and personal, like internet archives. For me, it was a way to visually belong to the events, because at that moment I was already in Prague and watch everything through the internet or like TV stream. So this is how short films from the archive, Silently Like a Comet and Listen to the Horizon was made. I will speak about these films in a moment and will show you a few examples of how I work with images and sound. Now we can see images of revolution and wars really fast. People are streaming events through the internet, so sometimes it's hard to analyze this material. This can be at the end very emotional experience, and this is a perspective from which I try to explore the topic of war and political conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine, with its potential to be presented through the found footage or archival materials. And I think that and all this war and revolution in media is interconnected, of course, but for me, picture of war is also connected with sound of peace. And I try to use this cruel and really violent shots with actually sound of peace life or sound of nature in a different way. I think that maybe I will show you first example, and after we can speak about. First example will be from the film Silently Like a Comet. It's actually a 8 minutes short film when I made from a slow down brief moments of revolution of dignity on Maidan. And I was interested in showing not just people as participants in history, but people under center weather and time condition. It was a very cold January and February that year, and often the events unfolded at night. So the presence of weather is a visual factor was also important for me.
Ну мы вот лежит 3 человека, блин, ну они 100% мертвые, но один вроде дышит. Давай, ну вон тут оттаскивают раненых, 3 трупа точно я вижу, если не больше. Ладно, давай. Тут, я говорю, трупы лежат. Будете? Видео, вот она, вон. Он покажет, вон они лежат, они. Алло. Ацик, скоро прямое будет через пару минут. Тебе нужно показывать трупы в основном.
Я показываю, как стреляют людей, они падают.
Сейчас, когда... Вот сейчас будет прямой эфир, я буду говорить про трупы, и трупы показываю.
Now I will show you excerpts from actually 2 excerpts from my second film that is connected to subject of wars and revolutions. It was this film. It's 22 minutes long, and it was my reaction to the war in Ukraine that started in 2014. And this is actually also a documentary found footage essay made up of recycled video shots. In one of the first scenes of this film, I used archival footage of a quiet rural life, which is so characteristic of the idea of Ukraine. Cows gazing, sunflowers blooming, insects buzzing. And I combined the shot with footage of the war of 2014, which take place in exactly the same field. And insects are still buzzing in the sound, but this sound at some point becomes a dominant and reminds us of flies looking for something to eat in the field where there are no survivors.
Саня, ляг! Саня!
Саня, бля! Алло! Давай, блядь, сюда, ты пасека была, бегом, блядь, в руку, блядь, ну, блядь, у нас 2 трупа, блядь, мы нахуй ебанули. Алло, Санё! Сань!
I often work in this associative way by combining images of horror, human violence, destruction, and anger. I contrast them with sounds of nature. It is important that the sounds are not always calm and pleasant. They can be volcanoes, sounds of splitting icebergs, thunderstorms, the feeling of earthquake through the vibration of low frequencies in sound. Nature too can be cruel to people. And in the second example, I want to show you how I work with propaganda sound and visual, not only through the logical media analysis, but by using the most emotional, actually propaganda methods, music and songs.
Ukraiński powstańcie,
I need to say I'm sorry because I always understand that all of my films are really sad, and of course our today's events is not about like some funny about funny circumstances, but still I'm sorry for all of this hard pictures. If I have time, I want to speak about my one more film. It's actually my first feature-length documentary consisting of archive footage material, and is based on our family story. Actually, my grand uncle from Ukraine was one of the soldiers who came on tanks to occupy Prague in 1968, but after returning to Ukraine, he committed suicide and was both metaphorical and physically cut out from all of the family memories and photos. And one of the important theme of this film is how does it feel to be an occupier against your will. Actually, it's really hard for me to watch this film today because it's so all the subjects that are in this film is really like current topics right now. The heart of the film is the subject and the process of memory fragmentization, both personally and national. The central storyline is connecting the movie together is the cutting out of the memories. In this film, the nature sequences, such as scenes in the wood, by the sea, etc., were specially shot on 16mm film stock in order to look more authentic in relation with the archive material. We purposely shot them on color film to add a subjective point of view to the camera, which embodies the point of view of my great uncle. Through these scenes, we want to show and give the audience a sense of the man's escape from the terrible events inside himself. This is his inner forest, dark and restless. I will show you maybe two scenes, first scene of the film and the last scene of the film. If I have time.
Some few minutes, yes, you have
okay,
time.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I have some problems with this. One moment. I'm sorry. And so in this film, I actually combine this archival footage from 1968 from different countries. Some footage was completely newly found, and newly shot materials that represent my grand uncle, we can say, like subjective point of view. I won't also show you maybe only part of the last sequences because it's like 4 minutes or something like that, but it's important because it's the final shot by the sea are like calm and represent the inner peace of him when he found when he finally returned to the family, to the history of a family, and we can hear his name loudly through the film, because actually it starts with the problems that I don't know who it is. I just know that this person exists somewhere in our family, but nobody wants to talk about him. So I will show you at least a part of the sequences. Oh, I'm sorry.
Neděle. Jeden z řády dnů v běhu tohoto světa. Abych nikdy nezapomněla, tak si do deníku zapíšu. Můj prastric se jmenoval Boris Kamarov.
Thank
sorry,
you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Anna. Please.
No, I just want to say that I'm sorry that I'm have a lot of video examples. I'm not so much in like information like somehow it is connected with the theory, but I think in my case it's more important to see this connection in the film than listen my what I think about it. And I also want to say only one last thing, that now for a quite of a long time I'm working on a new movie, Son of the Living Dead. And one of the main lines of this film will be dark tourism, like it's actually tourism of disasters, wars, cemeteries, hurricane, tornadoes, eruption, and the images of the force of nature destroying anything that stands in their way are put into contrast with actually, again, violence that people carry inside of them. So in the next film, it also will be interconnected, I think, in a more obvious way of this subject.
Thank you so much, Anna. We are looking forward to the next film. It is pretty much, of course, thank you for sharing your work in detail. We're very much connected to the topic, and I think it shows how media and arts can be used to document and communicate war, its impacts, and interconnections with all. Thank you for all the speakers for their quite important contributions and important remarks. Now I would like to open the floor to the audience, to your questions and to the discussion. on how actually our question was how media and arts can be used, studied to document and communicate the interconnections between conflict, environment, and sustainability. First, we can have questions from the audience. If you have to share your questions and comments, you can use the raise hand button or use the chat function. All are welcome. Yes, Lida, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for the great, insightful presentations. It was more than I expected, actually, because we did in just 3 cases, very interesting insights from indigenous population to Ukraine and to the global South. So very inclusive indeed. My question regarded something about, it was about the methodologies used. As I mentioned when seeing the documentary about Ukraine, there was this sound of kitchen during one of the movies, which was to me very interesting, especially considering, for example, how Europeans watch the wars in Bosnia, for example, while eating or cooking and without any sensitivity at all, or how we all watched, for example, what happened in Ukraine in 2014 without any sensibility at all, but it's completely different with Ukraine of 2022. So the sensibility is what changed in producing this material, this documentation. So we have a human element, although we can be social scientists. And my question was about this clash between what we call humanities and social sciences. I did an article in 2014. I'm just sending a link for the ones interested, argumenting how similar was somehow 3 different protests in Tirana against the chemical weapons from Syria, dismantlement, the Turkish protest of Taksim Square, and the Maidan protest in Ukraine, when they all had in common this Europeanization desire. The point is that I reflected theoretically about how Europeanization is a matter of perception. Some look at it as a matter to gain more interest or more economic outcome, and some, from the point of view of the population or the citizens, consider it as a matter of democratization and living in a democratic country, not changing your own currency with euros and just living just a matter of being part of the club of the European Union. And when I analyzed the case of Ukraine, I did a discourse analysis of some interviews of the protesters, saying that actually this is not about being part of the European Union. This protest is about being Europeans as a matter of standard. We want to live in a democratic country. So while my reflection was theoretically based, I didn't use any kind of sample or interview or any kind of quantitative or qualitative methodology. I just felt something that I was sensible, and I felt that I was sensible to the Ukrainian protest because something like that happened in Tirana, since I am Albanian born. So when it comes to methodology, art can be part of humanities, but from a social science perspective, you need to show statistics. For example, the May-Britt Öhman showed in the beginning much more maps, statistics, what part, how much of the indigenous population are part of the academia. As Anna Kryvenko mentioned, you can also speak about the same thing from an artistic point of view. So in this interdisciplinarity, I just wanted to know from a methodological point of view, how could the 3 persons who presented defined their main methodology, and if they ever have applied the critical discourse methodology in their work or in how they explain their topics to an academic audience?
Thank you, Lida, for your question. I think it was a question for at least 2 speakers. Would you like to answer? Who would you like to go first?
Can I just ask, I'm not really sure what you meant, if I'm using critical discourse analysis in the collaborations, or how do you mean?
As a methodology, not just a textual analysis about the content, but a critical discourse analysis, more philosophical, as a philosophical reflection, and not just based on the quantitative, qualitative methods that are usually used by the social scientists. So either you prove something to be true and you have to show me that you are indigenous, you have to show me that there is an impact of the environment, or you either prefer this kind of critical reflection, ethical discussion about the same topic. You don't feel you have to prove it with statistics. You have the sensibility, you belong to this population, and so you want to make people feel critically, reflect critically about it.
Well, in my work, I do both. I collaborate with a person who's in natural sciences. So we have had a long time collaboration. So in terms of expertise on environmental impacts and what I refer to as destruction, I rely on natural sciences and what's already shown. So it's not something that I how to say, it's part of the work to also point at what's stated from natural sciences and technology, that this is destruction. It's not hard because it's a lot of work done. But then I also collaborate and make space for voices from the Sami in particular, as it's my area, who say the same things but in different ways, I would say. So those films that I showed is part of this. There is studies showing exactly the same things, but then I let them have to come to talk in academic settings and films and also articles. So it is both based on quantitative studies, other studies, and what I bring to it is this, well, the insights, where the actual on the ground, what happens right here. And so thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Now, comment on this? Perhaps about the sensibility part. Okay, Waya, please.
Yes, thank you. Many thanks to all 3 speakers. I think the talks were really stimulating. And thanks to you, Daria, for suggesting this topic. It's not an easy topic to address, bringing all issues at the same time. But it is particularly timely. Just a short reflection in relation to Alida's or Leida's question and reflection. I think, fortunately, also within social sciences, from an academic perspective, I mean, and humanities, there are areas and methods and practices that do create bridges, and May-Britt, I think, is a very good example of that. Understand that you have been engaging in action research, right, in participatory methods, bringing in indigenous actors in research, but you are also an activist, right? You engage, you have different multiple subject positions, as we say, right, and capacities and identities. So you are a perfect example of that, but there is also, to connect this to art, even within, as we call it, social sciences, at least in our field, communication and media studies, there have been some people that do arts-based research, and they do bring artistic means and expressions, and to artistic means of expression to create knowledge and communicate that knowledge. Again, working with academics, but also with artists and people with multiple identities. But it was interesting also how Anna's work uses, let's say, something that we would think scientists use, right? The archive, and how the archive becomes, again, a tool and a means of artistic expression that adds to, that gives new insights to experiences and feelings. One could say that this is something like, let's say, a scientist, right, use. So it was interesting to see that, but also in Edwick's presentation, the activist voice touches upon and engages with issues that are being explored both by artists and academics in collaborations. I don't know if Edwick, you have been working, often this happens in, well, development, let's say, projects, etc., that do bring in also local populations and inhabitants. And I think May-Britt also addressed the need, right, to engage, well, in democratizing ways, right, with indigenous populations when addressing complex societal issues that impact on people's lives. So these were just some thoughts in relation to your question, Laida, but also seeing the connections of common concerns, even if having different starting points, but also allowing people to express in different ways. As you, May-Britt, said, we can use the academic tools and language, right? And we can have local populations or artists use their own language. And at the end, we share same concerns, aims, and we participate in common struggles.
Thank you, Waya. Are there any other questions from the audience to our speakers or about the topics that we have been discussing? Perhaps I could, yes, May-Britt, please.
I was thinking of Anna's films that I found really moving and sad. And one thing that I think about a lot, because we have a lot of photos of Sami in really like taken in within racial biology, and so they're actually like it's assault, it's a traumatic event, and so we have those photos. And I think it's I avoid using those photos, so I won't use the archives, as this is like a person that is a victim at the time. But I'm wondering how you work with that, like the woman who got her hair cut, and I'm thinking, was this a real event, or is it who is this person, and how do you relate to actually using someone's tragic moment in an artistic film?
I need to say this is a really hard question, because when I work on this film, My Unknown Soldier, what is actually like about my family, but it still was a big question. Can I, because in that film I use my my own photos of my mother, my grandmother. It was like not a problem, but complicated to work with that and find a way how I can tell the story that I want to tell through these images. But this woman with cutting hair. For me, it was important that it was in a connection with this propaganda song that is now with the victory, and we can only, I don't know, sing and be like hopeful on a new life. But when for me, when the war ends, as we all knew, nothing ends at all, because people still suffering. And for me, I found these images in I think in a French archive official, and the name was, I don't remember the name of this reel, but it was somehow so absurd. It was like victory, something with victory. And I think this is, and at that moment, I want to use it because it was so weird that someone can speak about victory and see these images. So for me, it's more like, I don't know, you know, it's like, it's so somehow so complicated, because sometimes I see something and this is so terrible, and actually it may be at that images or shots, nothing like really terrible, or I don't know, death or something not going on, but you just can't use these images. And with this woman, for me, it was important that this is a part of this never-ending war. So,
and this particular scene when she's having her haircut, do you know what it is? What is the?
I think it's Paris a few days after 8th of May. I think it's May 45 in Paris.
And do you know why she's having her haircut?
Because there were collaboration with Nazis. So.
No, they had a similar in very tragic and terrible story of Denmark and Norway women that were dating or like together with Nazi soldiers. So they had to not Denmark was the majority was not fighting against the Nazi, neither in Norway, but still when the war ends, the discourse changed and it's like, oh, we were always fighting, and those women were the ones who were collaborators. So they were punished and had their haircut and stigmatized and yeah. So it's really important. But I was also like this, something that I tried to work with is, well, it's hard when it's what if her children or grandchildren finds this? How do you think about the ethics? How to?
It's a hard question, but I think that it's important how you use these images or how I use these images in the film. And I think for me, it's important that at this moment, she's a victim of circumstances, because we know nothing about her. So for me, from this ethical point of view, I don't have this, like, I have a questions, of course, for me, but I not feeling like sorry for using this, because I think that I didn't show her that she did something bad. But of course, it's always a problem when you use some pictures out of context. It's always complicated. But sometimes through this using out of context, you can show a bigger picture. And for me, it's more important in my work. But it's, of course, it depends, because actually in my Unknown Soldier, we use a photo of one. It was a terrible story in Slovakia in 1968, because one woman actually from Ukraine, her husband was Slovak, some army guy, not a soldier, but like higher. And but she was from Ukraine, and she was on a street with her kids, and they speak Russian, and it was at the first day of invasion. And it was the people trying to like actually kill her on the street. And at the end, we have only like 2 photos of this event. She was completely naked, and they were trying like to lynch her actually. And I also use these images without her face, only like body and all of this happy, really happy young people. But I found this story in a police archive. So I use a police protocol with this, like, you know, really cold everyday official language. And I think it's really important that at the end you have this like feeling the like black and white, that actually this is never black and white, any political events, and this importance that people are always at the other side. So, but it always, but it also was a big question for me. Can I use this picture or not, or can I use this police protocol? I can, because we don't use her name or family or names of the street, like just an information. But I think it really depends on how you want to use it in a bigger picture. So for me, it's important. But it's a hard question.
I can say for Sami, we're working right now, and I have a research project just funded to work with how to have sovereignty over the images of the Sami, and to be that you. And I always say that you have to be really careful with images of Sami. I mean, other Sami are using pictures of Sami also in different ways, but we have a far-reaching discussion on how to do this. And I think it's important to reflect on not just like taking photos and films of people that are in a very like vulnerable situation and a situation of trauma, and then using them to show the realities or whatever we want to show, but to do it in a way that it also shows respect to those who are there, and they're like, if they're not alive, but they're after children and grandchildren and families. And I have no exact answer on how to do that, but I just think that it's so important, because we are overflowed with images, and we kind of lose the understanding. Like, if this, I'm just thinking for everyone, like if this was my grandmother, or how would I feel if knowing the story behind, or maybe I didn't know and now I find out what happened or something.
I think it's, I'm agree, and it's like really complicated question. And actually now with the war in Ukraine, every day I see like hundreds of pictures and like thousands of videos. Like, and sometimes I don't know, I want to see these pictures or not. And some pictures, some moment when I saw this, like, shots from satellites or from war drones, and you understand that somewhere there I can see the tank or some machine or some home. At the end you can see only some, like, something blowing, and you have this feeling this is like somehow not a video game, because I don't like this these examples, but you can completely forget that people are inside of these tanks and inside of this machine, because you every day watch these pictures, and this is like really weird. And for me it's also important to work with it somehow. I think it's important to show this picture inside of some context, to understand how this media machinery work, because it's like really complicated. And I think we need to be trying to be sensitive with the images, but somehow we need to try to work with that. And I don't think that we have some one or two answers how to do it. For me, it's every time it's really individual situation with moving images or with photography.
Thank you, Anna, May-Britt. I think this was an important exchange. Any other questions to the speakers or about the topic? We have some 5-7 minutes left. Yes, Joanna.
Yes, I have a question to May-Britt Öhman about like you said you have an indigenous background. Did you grow up in an indigenous community and then get into academia, or were you in academia and then get interested in your background and how academia is interconnected or can be interconnected with indigenous backgrounds?
Well, I actually wrote a piece on this and how it's all started. I'll see if we can find it. Actually, the name of the piece is Being May-Britt Öhman. No, I can't find it. Well, I'll write the title here. And you can check in my website at if you check my profile at Uppsala University, I have written about this. For Sami, it is Sami have been part of academia for a long time, but in Sweden, on Swedish side, we're not many who are open with our identities. In my case, I belong to the Luleå Forest Sami. Were to be assimilated and erased. So in my family, we've been like silenced, and my mother did not want to be referred to as Sami. So I didn't learn about this until very late in life. I had already become a PhD when I learned about this, and at the same time starting a project on my home territories and rivers. So it kind of came at the same time as I started studying my own areas. And then, well, I had to deal with that part, and it's been an ongoing journey since 2008. But I think it's better to read. It's a long process, and the first piece I wrote was about this. Yes, I've got it here. Yeah. So it's open. You can find it here. The first things that I wrote about this. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting.
Thank you. We have some few minutes left. I would like to ask Voya if she has some reflections, general reflections about today, about the event from the perspective of MEC5 team, perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you, Daria. Again, I would like to thank May-Britt, Anna, and Edwick for sharing their perspectives on this broad topic that brings together conflict, environment, and sustainability. I think something that became clear in these fascinating talks is that we cannot look at crisis, conflicts, wars, and environmental issues as isolated, right, as separate. There is often this dilemma of human survival, especially in times of crisis, versus saving and protecting the environment. But I think it is structurally problematic, and it is a trap. And of course, it's difficult when the argument that is raised is first, we have to deal with famine, poverty, and the war, and then think of the environment. And these are strong arguments, right? Who could go against it when people don't have to eat or they're being killed? But at the same time, this is a trap dilemma because conflicts and wars do create severe damage, right, to entire ecosystems in which people live. And the people that we would call them, ironically, was lucky enough to survive, cannot live in destroyed cities, right, and ecosystems as their homes and their livelihoods have been destroyed. So we cannot simply look at these separately. I think any kind of anti-war or pacifist discourse and its claims, but also claims about social justice are, in my understanding, interconnected with environmental claims. We just need to make these connections visible, and we can have long discussions on how to do that. And something that I could point to at the same time is that we need to engage in broad societal alliances. We can start by acknowledging our limitations, right, in these efforts. We as others, academic, artists, media professionals, activists, cannot either study or present, discuss, or highlight, right, these dimensions of these complex phenomena that pertain to conflict, exploitation, discrimination, war, destruction, and the environment at once. We can only do, we can only focus on one aspect or few aspects or issues, cases, dimensions each time. So for this purpose, I think we do need broad societal alliances of, for example, academics from different disciplines engaging also in different methods, as it was already addressed, and practices, artists, media professionals, activists, indigenous populations, so that we learn from one another, that we connect with similar struggles or connect to broader struggles. And hopefully, I think it was addressed one way or another from all speakers, to collectively, I think, create knowledge about these issues that will hopefully lead to, let's say, action and change, but in ways that are relevant for societies. Not saying that it is easy, it takes time, energy, but we don't have the luxury of each one of us isolating in our bubbles, right? I think we do need broad societal alliances. So yes, Daria, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just, thank you. I agree on this, and I think MEC5's work was also aimed at some point towards these alliances, and I hope we can have more and more diverse participants from across different fields in these alliances for more work, for more focus on what has been talked so far during this event today. I can have a final question or comment, or otherwise we can close the meeting slowly. Anyone who like to share something?
Thanks to the active audience and Nico, who is leading also our work, says hi, he couldn't be with us, he's somewhere engaged at a conference in Istanbul. But yes, Daria, I think we are committed into also participatory methods of work, collaborative methods of work, and these broad societal alliances. And okay, each time we can do small bits and pieces, but these are our efforts also within this project. Yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much to all speakers, May-Britt, Edwick, Anna, for your contributions. It was very nice to have you. Thank you to the audience for their active engagement.